Some thoughts from the writings of Rousseau. An unbroken horse erects its mane. It paws the ground, and it starts back impetuously at even the sight of a bridle, while one which is properly trained suffers patiently, even whip and spur. So, savage man himself will not bend his neck to the yoke to which a civilized man will submit without even a murmur, but he prefers that most turbulent state of authentic liberty to the most peaceful slavery. We cannot, therefore, from the servility of nations already enslaved, judge of the natural disposition of mankind for or against slavery. We should go by the prodigious efforts of every free people, those that remain, to save themselves from oppression. I know that the former are forever holding forth in praise of the tranquillity in which they enjoy their chains, and that they call that state of wretched servitude a state of peace. But when I observe the latter, those remaining free peoples, sacrificing pleasure or peace or wealth or power or life itself to the preservation of that one treasure, that treasure of liberty, which is so disdained by those who have lost it, when I see the tendency of free-born animals dash their brains out against the bars of their cage, just from an innate impatience of captivity itself, when I behold numbers of naked savages, those that despise the European pleasures, braving hunger, fire, even the sword and death, to preserve nothing but their independence, I feel that I must conclude it is not for we slaves to argue about liberty. And with this, I am forced to agree. Over the last holiday weekend, whether that was Canada or the 4th of July for you, or wherever you perhaps might find yourself in the world, I happened to find myself rather struck by either reading the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms or the American Bill of Rights, or contemplating perhaps even the Magna Carta, or certainly the UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All of these are worth your time and effort to read. It is certainly worth your time and effort to not only read, but to contemplate rather deeply, and I expect uncomfortably, whether or not there's a single right contained in any of those documents that one can actually exercise without compromise. Now, of course, this is not to say that at the moment, for most of us, the servitude and the relative lack of autonomy that most of us find ourselves in possession of, that our life is not without comfort. And we are, in fact, kept very well as domesticated animals and are relatively well treated at the moment. But that is a pleasure that is extended to us by our masters. And it is certainly not something that we can expect, though that we may enjoy it at the present, as we move forward into a world of resource scarcity, depletion, and power down. The treats and treasures that we are gifted with as a means to keep us compliant, I think it's intelligent to anticipate that these will be in shorter supply than they are right now. And once those are withheld, it may become conspicuous quite quickly that it is not that we are in fact free people, but rather well-treated servants, and there is a world of difference between those two states. But of course, as we've discussed here in the past, the first step to emancipation is to relinquish the dependency one may have within the culture and the society that one currently inhabits. One must adopt a skill set, a strategy, a means of making one's life in the world that isn't dependent on compliance and servitude, but something that one can carve out for oneself, at least as autonomously as one is able. And while it is extraordinarily valuable to become one's own sovereign and to be the captain of one's own fate in whatever manner one sees fit, it is almost certain that the cost of such will require a relinquishment of privilege, of affluence, very likely of some safety, very likely of some security. But that is, once again, to refer to Rousseau, the cost of true, real independence. That should be self-evident. Really, the question we should ask ourselves is it worth it? Is real, authentic independence, real autonomy, worth the sacrifices, worth turning one's back on the pleasures, again, extended to us by the control state? Well, that's worth an inquiry. The only people who are actually authorities on such a matter are those who have lived both ways. For myself, having had the privilege to have a foot in both worlds at various times in my life, I think once you've tasted the ability to live your life on your own terms, authentically, it's simply impossible to contemplate ever going back. Cheers, people.